Well, today I get to talk with Mason Siddick, and Mason and I go back a few years. The first time I met him, he was visiting our school as a college recruiter. He was a D-line coach at Carroll College, one of the most successful colleges at that level in the nation. And Mason played there and then went on and coached there for a while. And then I think the wife gave the call to move back to the West Coast, if I don't remember. I think that's how it went down. And
Need a little help, say with the kiddos.
right. And so he moved back out to the West Coast. And when he did, one of his other strengths is he's one of the best strength and conditioning coaches around. And we were fortunate to be able to have him help with our program for a couple of off seasons. And man, you just did a fantastic job, and the energy you brought to that was awesome. And getting to know you well and spend a lot of time with you was awesome. It's one of those things where, as a coach, I always try and hire people that are smarter than myself, which isn't necessarily that hard. But, I think I got one of the best when you came in and helped with our strength and conditioning. So, and that, yeah, my pleasure. You did awesome. And now he's the head coach at Jackson High School. And so Mason, without anything further, if you would like to give kind of some background about yourself, and and then especially kind of focus on maybe the racial aspect and what you've encountered and that kind of thing.
For sure. Thanks very much, Coach. I'll say that getting to, work with you at Lakewood was definitely one of the, I don't know if you remember or not, but at that point in time, I was kind of stepping away from coaching a little bit to just kind of figure out, because it's all I did upon graduating, and so I kind of stepped away from it and just did the strength and conditioning. But getting to work with you and see you around the boys, it really it ignited that fire again. And of course, we had very many conversations about what it's like to be a head coach and stuff like that. And, I thank you for being that person, being somebody that I can reach out to if I'm not sure about something or need help with something. I know I don't really have a lot of teeth in the game just yet, so to speak, but you're definitely somebody that's helping me, sink these bad boys in a little bit. So greatly appreciate that. Like Coach T said, I coach at Jackson High School, but I was born in Zimbabwe. Lived in Zimbabwe. If a lot of you don't know, it's in Southern Africa, right above South Africa. We share a border with South Africa. Lived in Zimbabwe for 12 years, I believe. Moved to the United States in 2000 with my family. Had kind of a rough go, when we first moved here, just because of immigration, immigration attorneys and some people not being as ethical as they should be and stuff like that, So my family really went through quite the journey, to get to citizenship. Excuse me. But we finally got there. I think I got my citizenship, so we moved to the United States in 2000. I got my citizenship like in 2014 or 15. It was definitely quite the journey, like I said, but well worth it. In Zimbabwe, I went to boarding school, which if you don't know, Zimbabwe is a British colony, so there's a lot of the British influence and so forth. I've been told that sometimes my accent still kind of comes out, so you might hear it with the way I pronunciate or enunciate some of my words. But yeah, I moved with my family, 2 older sisters, a younger brother, my mom and dad, with nothing but the clothes in our luggage, and came to try to make a living out here, and so I guess my childhood, I'll speak mostly of my growing up in America, as that's more relevant to what we're talking about and the purpose of today's meeting. Growing up in America, I had a great childhood, but at the same token, I had to kind of grow up a little bit quicker than maybe I needed to or should have, in a sense. And that goes back to the experiences with the immigration attorneys and just the hard times that my family went through. There was a lot of times where instead of hanging out with friends, you know, I was in junior high at that point in time, which would be middle school now, and high school, you know, I would spend a lot of my time working, with cutting grass and doing stuff like that, helping my dad work in apartments, painting, you know, doing maintenance, just to help the family survive and eat, right? Keep a roof over our head. And that really made me grow up, you know, a lot quicker than some of my peers, I guess, at least from you know, or I guess I should say mature, right? In that sense, I understood the value of a dollar and what it is to work for things and not have things. And, you know, it was it was great in that sense. You know, we lived in Kirkland, Washington. I went to Lake Washington High School. Wasn't the most diverse high school at the time when I was going there, but you know, I had enough black friends and I guess you know, friends from other ethnic backgrounds, but it definitely wasn't you know, the most diverse school at the time. But in high school, I would say, and more so even when I first moved here, I didn't experience the blatant kind of racism or anything like that. You know, people calling me the N-word or being, you know, violent or nothing like that in that sense. But it was more so the, how would you put it, like the subtle type of racism, like, you know. And I think you know, the older I get, I think it chalks back to ignorance in a sense. You know, like when we first moved here, kids would always be like, oh, you came from Africa, did you wear clothes in Africa, do you know what a house is, you know, like were there elephants in your backyard, and, you know, things like that, which they're funny things, right? But at the same token, you know, they're kind of derogatory in a sense. But when it's only as I've gotten older, right, and I watch TV and stuff like that, when you tend to see clips about Africa, it's usually on a National Geographic, or, you know, it's unfortunately the commercials where they're asking for charity and stuff like, you know, stuff like that. And so all you see is the dark side or the bad side or the unfortunate side of it. And so how could you not think that maybe that's how the world is over there, you know? And I think that part of what you're doing is part of the answer, right? Like, we as people have to be willing to want to do our own research, right? And do our own homework, and not just take something that we see on TV, or, you know, that we hear from somebody at face value, and that's it, right? You know, we have to be willing to kind of educate ourselves, you know. And I think education is a big part of the answer. I mean, I don't really know what the answer is or anything like that, but I definitely believe that education is got to be in there, and some sort of education reform, or something, you know, to do with education. And that's with the youth and the kids to adults even, right? But we know how, if we're educating the kids, we're kind of educating the adults too sometimes, because kids come home and they're like, I learned this today, and like this, did you know this, right? So uh, something like that. Kind of got off tangent there a little bit, and I apologize. But so when I first moved, you know, that was kind of the you know, the experiences that I had, you know, the one time, and it didn't hit me till I was a little older that this is what the situation was. But I remember, like I said, I lived in Kirkland. I had this friend Tony, like we would do everything together, lived in the same neighborhood. He was an Asian kid, you know, and he would come with me sometimes, you know, just to hang out with me when I was mowing, when I was cutting grasses and stuff like this. And the one time during the summer, I was cutting grass in the Kirkland neighborhood. It was walking distance from my house. And cutting grass, and it was a hot day in the summer, and Tony came and, he sprayed me with the hose in the backyard, right? So we started messing around, kind of having a water fight and all of that. We were running around, and I was chasing him, didn't think nothing of it. I was almost done with cutting the grass anyways. I think I was basically done, to be honest with you, because we started walking home, and as I started walking to my house, there was a police car that came around the corner, right, pulled up in front of me. Then there was another police car that came. So there were two from the front, two police cars that came from the back, right? And they had basically surrounded us and stopped us. And then they were asking me, we're talking to Tony, right? We're like, what are you doing? Where you're coming from? And I'm telling them, I was just mowing the lawn. They're feeling the lawnmower to make sure the lawnmower is hot. I'm not lying, or I don't know, right? And at that point, I was terrified. Not necessarily, I wasn't, I guess, what you would call woke yet, because I was still kind of new to the country. But I was terrified that I was going to get into trouble, and then I was going to be sent back home. Right, because I wasn't a U.S. citizen at that point. I had no idea why I had cops around me or anything like that, and to this day, I couldn't really tell you why the cops were called and why they came to talk to me, other than the fact that somebody must have seen us running. I guess Carmen said, like, my deductive reasoning, right? Somebody saw us running around the neighborhood, saw somebody they thought they shouldn't have been in the neighborhood, and called the police, right? And so that was my first full-on, like, I guess I could say, without knowing it at the time, experience with racial profiling, I guess, and discrimination in that sense, because like I said, with the kids asking all those questions, so you don't know no better, man. It's just kids being kids. But at the same token, like I said, as we educate, we will get to a point where we can't just say kids are being kids, right? We got to teach them better. So that was my first full-on experience with any sort of anything, right? Other than, at that point in time, I was probably a sophomore, I think. Might have still been in ninth grade. I was either ninth grade ninth grade or a sophomore. And the rest of my high school career, there was nothing too crazy. I think, in all honesty, too, what I will say is, when I was in high school, our principal was Black. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but it's not very often, especially being at Lake Washington. But Mr. Robinson was the principal at that time. So, but I never ever felt any sort of discrimination or anything from teachers or anything like that. They were always willing to help me, but I also think that kind of, it goes back to how I treated them too, coming from a boarding school background, having manners. Some people would say, oh, you talk proper, you talk well, how do you speak English so well, in that sense. And it's just, like I said, Zimbabwe is a British colony. We're taught to speak the Queen's English, so to speak, just without the British accents, I mean, those were the subtle things, going to college. I guess I must be, people would think I'm a glutton for punishment or something. I went to college in Helena, Montana.
Mm-hmm.
When I stepped on campus, I was the only Black kid on the football team.
Wow.
There was, I think, maybe 4 Black kids in the school, one guy and 2 girls, one other, Black guy and two girls. And, I never experienced any face-to-face racism in terms of somebody coming up to me and, disrespecting me or anything. Maybe part of that is because I played football. I don't know, definitely got the looks when you're walking around town, the staring and stuff. And then, Helena's a small town. Eventually people get to kind of know who you are, but was always looks. I remember my freshman year, my roommate, who became my best bud, his grandma lived in Butte, which is about a 60-mile drive from Helena. And we were going to go see his grandma on a weekend. And he's driving his car. I didn't have a car freshman year. I'm sitting in the passenger side. He had a Honda Prelude. It was like a, 2-seater type thing, a small car, 2 big dudes in it, tinted windows. Got pulled over, right? We weren't speeding, weren't doing anything. Got pulled over. Cop asked my buddy for his license and registration, right, which is standard procedure. But then I thought it was kind of interesting because he came over to my side, then asked me for my license and registration. And, I was just like, okay, but I'm not driving or anything like that. But okay, I gave it to him. Then he went to the car, was running, obviously must have been running that stuff, came back to the car, pulled my roommate out of the car and made him go sit in the car with him. And then was asking him, like, who's that guy you got in the car? Where you taking him? How do you know him? What's your relationship like? And stuff like that. And I was just like, I think when he came in the car, I think he was kind of really shocked too, because he's a white dude, probably never been pulled over unless he did something wrong. And then to have those kind of questions, he never experienced that. He thought he was probably more heated than I was about that situation, because it was unwarranted to be, I guess, investigating me, or just asking those kind of questions, right? About me like that. But I'm just like, hey man, let's just go have a good weekend. Nothing happened. Like we're good. Like, let's go. It's nothing new in a sense. And at that point in college, it was definitely a lot more woke than I was when I was in junior high or middle school, I guess you could say, at least for 9th grade. And other than that, then I started dating my wife. I met my wife in college. So naturally, right, again, she's white. Basically, I'm in a white town, so you get the looks, you get people looking, and that would upset her more so than it would me. But again, nobody ever really to my face disrespected me and all of that, right? Just in their heads, at least, but I think for me, what really, like with the race stuff and all of that, I've always kind of just approached it like, oh man, it's another day. It's just life, right? Like when you walk out the door as a Black man in this country, there's certain like little checklists or whatever that you got to go through to make sure that you get to come home okay. It's you worry about things that you maybe you shouldn't have to worry about, or that other people don't have to worry about. You're more conscious about your surroundings and everything. You're more conscious about when you're walking on the street. I mean, this would happen too, right? You're walking on the street and there's a lady that's walking your way, and then all of a sudden she crosses the street, just to get to the other side, just to be all right in that sense. And so you definitely go through a little bit of a different mental checklist, and you have to prepare yourself a little bit differently. I would know, I guess, just from having a bunch of white friends and going to a white college, right? And I think though, when it really hit home for me is when you start having kids and you start having to think about, I talk about this with my wife quite a bit. When is the right time to have the talk with you or your kids? Like the other day, I wouldn't say like the other day, like it had like maybe a couple of weeks ago, right? My 7-year-old son, because when you're watching the news, all they're talking about is COVID, or the marches and the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and just everything is always on the news. And my son is, who doesn't know anything, is just like, Daddy, why are they killing black people? And I got to think now, snap, I got to answer this question. Like, how do I answer this question to my 7-year-old son to make him understand, like, hey, there's stuff like this that's going on, but not everybody that wears a badge or whatever is evil or is bad. And it's like, man, I shouldn't be talking to a 7-year-old kid about this kind of stuff. And I shouldn't have to have a talk with my kid about, hey, you need to act this way and like that, right? He should be able to have the freedom to be who he is, like who he truly is. And it's a work in progress, and that's, I think, what we're still kind of fighting for. And I think that's just, at the end of the day, I don't speak for all black people or anything like that, but that's what we want, man. Is like that. We're free, but are we really free at the same token? You know what I mean? So yeah, I've been fortunate enough, though. Like I said, I've never felt victim to any sort of physical racism. It's just the blatant. Sometimes when you're driving on the freeway and somebody just want to flip you the bird, but. And that could be for, I think I'm a pretty good driver. So, I don't, but that could be for multitude of reasons or whatever, and I think.
I know that's an experience I've had, but.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Just for no reason and stuff like that. And, but like I said, I've been blessed, and I've been fortunate enough to not have to experience it, like some other people have,
Right.
but it's out there. You see it every day. You prepare for it every day. You worry about it every day, even as a coach, right? And just as a black professional, I think we tend to hold ourselves to higher expectations. Like, if you told me that you needed X, Y, and Z, I'm trying to give you RSTUVW X, Y, and Z to make sure that I keep my job because,
Right.
Of how I look in that sense. So yeah, definitely, even as a coach, I feel pressure to represent and to prove that worth. And yeah, I just be to prove that, I got here not because of how I look or whatever, but because I deserve it and I can do it and
Right.
to do it.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask from things you've talked about. This
For
first one
sure.
might be touchy, so if you want to answer it or don't, that's fine. You're talking about your 7-year-old son, so that's first or second grader, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, first grade.
Okay. So I heard there was a school district in our state that put out a children's book, and it was for I think kindergarten or first grade, and it was talking about the police killing a black man, and it was is that the right age for the schools? I mean, obviously schools need to educate and they need to be talking about what's going on, but what is the right age for schools to have that conversation, and when should we leave it to parents?
That's I guess it's touchy, right? I don't think that first grade is the right age, but the reason why I think it's touchy is because in this day and age, the availability of information for kids, like kids are always on their tablets, they're on phones, the technology has just made information available at the click of the finger. And so 7-year-olds now are far more informed about what's going on just because of the ads they see or whatever pops up on their on the media. But I think if at that age, it should be left to the parents, because my assumption is if a kid sees something, they're going to ask the parent a question. It's on the parent now to do what they're supposed to do, right? Educate the kid and teach them and help them understand a little bit, right? I would say probably, that's tough. I don't know the right age. Is probably somewhere in middle school, like eighth eighth grade to, to high school somewhere there, where kids can actually look at something and think of it like, can I really apply some sort of critical thinking,
Right.
And so I think at the young ages, it's more so teaching of empathy, trying to educate of cultures and differences, right? Like, I know a lot of people say, all right, well, I don't know why Black people are complaining. They have the same things available to them that we do. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we do have access to education and stuff like that, but depending on where you're at, your education, the stuff that's available for you could be totally different than another school, right? And depending on, we're all products of our environments, right? So if my great grandparents never went to school and never valued education because they've had to work, and they pass that on to my grandparents, who pass it on to my parents pass that on to me, how do you expect me to think that education is going to be, or how do you expect that I'm going to now just all of a sudden be smart, or be driven to want to get an education when it's never been a part of my family culture or dynamics because of the situation that we've been in, or whatever, So I think it's more so of, educating people that we're different, we come from different situations, but at the end of the day, we're all entitled to human rights. We're all entitled to a peace of mind and that kind of stuff. And then as they get older, you divulge into a little bit more of the more critical thinking type stuff.
Great answer. So again, education, it's been a common theme here. There's an old saying, knowledge is power, right? And
100%.
we live in the most knowledgeable time period in history. Like, it's all right at our fingertips. In some ways, I think maybe that's made us a little bit lazy. Maybe students of all varieties don't always pay as much attention because, well, if I want to know, I'll just go look it up, right? Like, it's right there. Hey, Google it, right? But
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you're right, because even like as coaches, for me, for example, right, I still kind of, bring a little bit of that old school mentality to football, in the sense of I make kids bring notebooks to meetings, because I want them to actually physically write stuff down. Like, I was going over run fits with the linebackers, and they're like, "Coach, is this posted on Huddle?" And I'm like, "No, because all you guys do is you just log on and you just look at it, and you're just looking at it, but you're not actually learning." But it's like, if you actually have to write it down and all of that, now you've got we talk about stealing reps. You steal reps because you've heard it verbally, you've seen it, right, visually, you've repeated it because you're writing it down. Like, you're getting all those things in right off the bat. And so, yeah, technology is kind of, it's kind of that way. But at the same token, it's great to have that access, because you can easily fact check somebody too, right? At the click, the click of a finger. But I think, when it comes to the kids, right, it's more so the curriculum. And I said, like, kids don't learn world geography or nothing like that. They don't know much about other cultures or other countries or anything like that. So it's hard to be empathetic to something or somebody if you don't know much about them or anything like that, right? So that's why I think that education of it, of teaching, teaching religions and what religions actually stand for in high school. You don't have to impose it on anybody. You're just educating people about these religions, right? And knowing things, or like I said, cultural backgrounds and what it's like. The more you know, the easier it is to relate to somebody, the easier it is to, like I said, be empathetic. And I think for kids, we as the school districts or as parents, we need to demand that there's some sort of teaching, like, in those areas that's going on, and then as we get older, we got to take it upon ourselves. Like, it's got to mean something to us to want to learn about somebody else or whatever. We're creatures of habit, right? If you think about it, you know, we tend to watch the news that gives us the information that we tend to want to hear, right? Or that shares our viewpoint, right? You know what I mean? So if I'm somebody who watches Fox News, I'm watching Fox News all the time, and that's my gospel, right? And I'm not saying, you know, NBC, CNN, BBC, all those people, I'm not listening to them because they don't know, and this is my truth, right? And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this is my truth, but also understanding what the other side is, right? Or taking the time to know, because we can share different viewpoints, right? And we can be on opposite sides when it comes to an idea or something, but we don't have to just hate each other.
Right.
You know, we don't have to just close off dialogue and be like, well, you think this way, so goodbye. You know, there's, you know, so I think we've got to be more open to that kind of stuff. But it's hard because it puts you in uncomfortable situations, right? People don't like to be uncomfortable. And at the same token, you know, I think a culprit is like political correctness. You know, I mean, I think it is something that started off with the great intentions, but it's gotten so bad now that people are afraid to share their opinions because they're afraid if I say something that might be taken out of context or say something wrong, I could potentially lose my job for that. So I'm just going to keep quiet and stay in my lane and not do anything about it. You know, so it's like, we've got, you know, it's that double-edged sword. We got to have the conversations, but we also got to be willing and ready to hear things that maybe we don't like to hear or don't want to hear. And that's the only way we're really going to be able to come together, is if we can put it all out on the table. But if people are being punished,
I like to think of it with, as a strength coach that you are, do you grow without getting uncomfortable physically? Right? Yeah. Like if you're just pushing the bar up, nothing's going to happen, right? You have to actually get to the point where your muscles are getting sore and you're pushing yourselves, and there's no growth without some being uncomfortable.
I totally agree, right? If you're doing the same thing every day and you're staying comfortable doing it, right, you're just staying the same, right? If you're just comfortable, you're staying the same. But growth comes from that, you know, uncomfortableness, right? Because now you're doing something that you don't usually do, and it's either pushing you to be better, or it could potentially push you to become a worse person, right? It all just depends on how you respond to the situation. But you got to have the fortitude enough, you know, the mental fortitude and the desire to say, you know, like, I want to be a part of this change, and I'm going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but in the end, it's all going to be for the better. You know, I mean, you're a perfect example of this. I'm, you know, doing something like this and talking to people and hearing different viewpoints and stuff like that. There might be times where somebody says something that might make you a little uncomfortable, but that's part of the growth and the growth and the path to understanding, right? The path towards empathy, I think.
There's another area that I'd like you to touch on a little bit more. Being an immigrant and coming over and having to, you know, wait, you know, over a decade before you actually gained your citizenship. And you mentioned when you had the police encounter that you were afraid you were going to get sent back to Africa, right? And right. You know, that's something that people of a lot of different cultures have to deal with as they come in as immigrants. So maybe would you just expand a little bit on your thoughts and your kind of experience as an immigrant who is hoping to gain citizenship and what you had to deal with there?
I think the biggest, like, so for us, right, the biggest part in our experience was the visa that our first attorney ended up bringing us on wasn't what he originally told us. So he ended up bringing us on an H1N1 visa, I think is what it's called, which basically states that the only way we could make a living in this country is if my dad started his own business. And so think back to when I said we moved to the United States with nothing but the clothes and our luggage. We didn't know anybody here. You know, we had some family in Vancouver, but we didn't know anybody here or anything like that. And then, oh, by the way, the only way you can make money is to start your own business, you know? And so you have that that stress because you feel like you're jumping into the deep end of the pool to learn how to swim before you even know how to swim, right? And so you're just trying to survive. You're not worrying about growing or trying to figure out how do I swim. You're just trying to figure out how to stay afloat to survive. So that definitely, like I said, it changes your experience because I didn't have a lot of the, the freedoms that, like things got a little bit better by the time my brother, because my brother's 6 years younger than me, for our family, he actually really got to have that, those teen years and not really have to worry about working and all that kind of stuff, but, so it changed my experiences in that because like I said, I was spending a lot of my time working in like my free time working. And then which I'm so thankful for though, to this day, because it's given me the work ethic that I have. It pushed me to work hard in high school when it came to football. I mean, I played high school in 9th grade, but I ended up getting hurt in the second game. So I really started learning how to play football my sophomore year, but I got, my college scholarship through hard work, in that. And so it changed my experiences in terms of leisure time. I wasn't a party kid. I wasn't, even when I went to college, I, never partied. I like to have a good time. I love to dance, excuse me, but I was never really a party kid, never really gravitated to that light or that side of things, always, even in high school, would get along with the older guys in a sense, I think just because of my, my maturity. But then again, part of that too is, the other side of the coin is being afraid, right? Oh man, if I do go to a party and the party gets busted or something and I get into trouble, right? Because my parents, when we move here and stuff, it's like, okay, look guys, we're not, we can't afford to get into trouble. Everybody's got to be, on your best behavior, because you want to make sure that you don't do anything to jeopardize the sacrifice that your family's already made, right? And not to be sent back home because you wanted to have a great night with some friends or something like that, so we were from the time we got here, our parents always drilled it into us about, hey, one thing you can't do, you can't get into trouble, and
And
so
it would jeopardize not just you, but your family, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's a lot bigger than it becomes a lot bigger than you, right? And even then, like even if it's just you don't want to be some kid that gets sent home and your family gets to stay, because your family's not going to stay, right? They're gonna go, at least you would hope, right? Depending on what kind of son I was. But they're not gonna not go. So yeah, you're right, regardless of how it ended up, you're jeopardizing your family, and so you constantly just making sure you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's and that kind of stuff,
Let me give you a couple more. What are the ideas that you have that you would like to see happen in our country? Could be legislative or educational or whatever. What are some ideas you have to improve our country with our current racial divide?
Man, I think it's finding. I think you gotta target this in different demographics, right? In the sense of like maybe age group wise, and so like for the youth, for the kids, it's the education and covering, maybe, like I said, broader topics like world geography, cultural studies, or religious studies or something like that, right? Because by the time kids are in high school, they've already encountered those kind of discussions and so forth, right? They've got friends from different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. So I think that's huge, right? I think teaching, changing the Black history that's taught is huge, right? When you think of Black history in high school or in schools, you're thinking of the civil rights movement, right? You're thinking of slavery, and that's about where it stops. Okay. But what about all the great Black people that have come, inventors, right? Or even, I was watching, we had to do some professional development for our school district, and it was a professional development on like equity and stuff like that. And they're talking about like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had no idea about, I mean, I knew about the burning of Tulsa, but I didn't know that Tulsa was a booming African community like that. And that's the reason why it got burnt down and so forth, right? But even just after that, and we're having a little panel discussion, it was amazing how many of the adults are like, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Like we're not taught those kind of things, right? So I think we need to really look at what we're teaching and fix and start there for kids. I think for adults, right? Adults will probably tell you, hey man, my school days are behind me. I'm done learning, right? You can't teach an old dog new tricks and so forth. But I think from that, how we, you have some adults who will be naturally more susceptible to that kind of stuff and open and let's go and let's have discussions and let's do this, right? And people now talking about, I'm not just going to be a spectator anymore. I'm going to speak up and those kind of things. And that's right. We do need more of that, but let's make sure that we're doing that because we're understanding of what's going on and we're empathetic to what's going on, and not that we're looking to be a voice for them, like a matter, if that makes sense. Like just saying, hey man, I'm speaking up just so that people say that I'm speaking up. But I really don't want to engage any conversations with anybody or anything. I think we all just got to
more than taking a selfie at a rally or something, right?
Right, exactly. I think it really starts for adults in connections, right? And we talk about this coaching wise. It's always about the connections with the kids and making relationships and developing them and nurturing them and so forth. It's no different as adults. We got to get to know people. We got to understand who they are. I'm more than just my skin color, right? I've got ideas, thoughts, passions, all those kind of things, just like you, and so yeah, it's just the willingness to put yourself in a situation to get to know somebody that doesn't look like you.
Awesome. Let's go last question. And then if there's anything that we didn't touch on that you want to talk on, you can close us out with your own thoughts there. But what gives you the greatest hope moving forward?
I mean, humanity, man. Like just the spirit and the essence of humanity gives me hope, because for every time you turn the TV on and you see something negative or whatever, right? And this goes back to the whole media thing though too, right? I feel like media is always just putting the negative on TV because it's a hotter page to read, or it's hot off the press, as opposed to good deeds and stuff like that. But through all that darkness and all of that, you'll always hear of a story of just of the human spirit, people just going above and beyond, because that's what it means to be a human, to be a human being. I'm a religious person, I guess, in a sense, and I always believe at the end of the day, good will overcome evil. Even if it feels like we're in quicksand and we're surrounded by evil at some point in time, right? It's that human spirit and so forth. So I believe in the human spirit, man. I see, even now, right, we've been down this road before racially, right, with protests and riots and so forth like that, but it seems to be hitting a little bit differently now, and people are more open to discussion, and we're having more allies, right, like, as they call them, right, more allies coming out and speaking and saying enough is enough. And that's that human spirit. Like at the end of the day, man, I'm not judging you on how you look. I'm judging you by your actions, what's in your heart, and go from there. So I think it's the human spirit. I hold faith and belief that, you know, we're innately born good, you know, and that evil and bad is taught and learned. So the more we can educate ourselves and correct those things, you know, we'll end up being all right, you know.
Great. Great. Any last thoughts?
No, I just, you know, want to say thank you for the opportunity to kind of share my story. It's not something that I speak on a lot, you know, but it's great to have discussions. It's great, you know, for people to kind of get to know me, not judge, you know, a book by its cover, so to speak. And yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for willing to be uncomfortable, right? And for putting this together, for sure.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We need to get back together sometime soon.
We definitely do, especially because I just live down the hill from you. You know what I'm saying? So
There we go.
we gotta make something happen.